Dude, check out this sweet ass new pedal I just got. Nice, man. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, but it's got this weird function called MIDI. What the hell is that? Actually, it's a pretty powerful tool you can use to control your gear. Sounds awesome, but how does it work? Glad you asked. Let me show you. Dude, get on the camera. Oh, shit. What is up, everyone? Man1Metalhead here. If you have a pedal that has MIDI capability, you might find yourself a little confused when you hear about PCs or CCs or channels or banks. And what about those extra cables? In this video, I'm going to give you all the information you need to know to get your MIDI devices set up and running. Whoa, what the fuck does MIDI mean? MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Ah, so it's an analog signal then. No, it's right there, man. Musical Digital Instrument Interface. So it's a digital signal. Got it. But those weird connectors on my pedal will carry the analog signal though, right? Nope. Any device that uses MIDI connections will not transmit an analog signal along with it. Meaning if the device has MIDI and analog connections, quarter inch or XLR for example, you'll also need to make those analog connections as well as MIDI if you decide to use MIDI. Cool, but tell you what, why don't we go ahead and record this video, and if you have any questions after I'm done, you can ask them. All right, let's get into MIDI connections and chains. MIDI will typically use a 5-pin DIN connector. You'll have female on the pedals or your devices and a male on your cables. Unfortunately, only 3 pins are used in most cases. This is because MIDI is generally a unidirectional signal, which means it only goes one way, similar to an analog signal. There is a bidirectional specification. However, I've yet to see that used. Sometimes you may see different MIDI connectors. For instance, the Boss 200 series pedals are going to have 1/8 inch MIDI connectors. Boss, if you're seeing this, really like to try out that modulation pedal. In any case, connecting your pedals with MIDI is just like connecting with analog. MIDI out goes to MIDI in, out to in, so on and so forth. Setting up a MIDI chain is very similar to setting up an analog chain. However, the order typically doesn't matter. In most chains, you're going to have one device that is sending messages or signals to all the other devices in the chain. In that case, you want to have that device, the sending device, the very first in the chain, and then anything after that shouldn't really matter. You can have that set up in whatever order you would like. You can have multiple devices sending messages. With this setup, whichever device is sending a message, it will only send messages to any devices that are downstream from it. So if it starts in the middle, it'll only send messages to the devices that are later, not the ones that are before it. Now, there is a possibility of creating a loop in the chain, so you can take your last device and your first device and connect them. You can run into a few problems with this. One is you can just have a MIDI message that is constantly going and never ending. The other possibility is you are going to send a message to a device that you do not intend. For the majority of use cases, having one device that is used to send messages is really the simplest to set up and easiest to control. Now that you've got everything connected, let's see how MIDI message works. But first, a PSA. You should always have your device manuals on hand when programming your MIDI, especially if you're really new to the device. There's a lot of really important information in those manuals that will just make programming way simpler, way easier, way quicker. Did you catch that? Catch what? When your device sends a message, it will go to all devices later in the chain. It is possible to stop that message midway through, and I'll get into that in a little bit. As a message hits each device, the respective device will basically see if it needs to pay attention to that message. If it does, it will make whatever changes, and if it doesn't, it will just ignore it. It is possible to send multiple messages at the same time. You can do one per device. You can do one message for all devices or any combination in between. Now, as I mentioned before, you can stop a MIDI message, and this is a typical function in most devices called MIDI through. So you can turn that on or off. If it is on, any MIDI messages that come to it will automatically be sent through to the later devices, and if it's off, the MIDI message will stop right at that device. This is one of the most common causes of issues I've seen with MIDI chains is one pedal is just automatically set up for MIDI through off. So when you're trying to program another device later in the chain, it's not getting those messages and nothing is happening. Oddly enough, in my experience, most devices are shipped with the MIDI through off. So you're gonna have to go ahead and turn that on right away when you get it, but just know that the function is there. One instance where you want to keep the MIDI through off is if you're sending a message to the device that sends messages to all the other devices. For instance, my Boss ES8 is what I use to control all my other MIDI devices. But I have a MIDI controller that is on the other side of the stage when I play live, so I can go over there and send a message to the Boss ES8 to change channels. And when the Boss ES8 changes channels, it'll automatically send whatever MIDI messages to my other devices. But I don't want that MIDI signal from the controller to go through the ES8 to other devices that can possibly create some issues. So I just make sure to turn the MIDI through off on the ES8, and then the ES8 will control everything else. Now that we know how a MIDI message works, let's get into what is contained in that message. Most messages will contain some or all of the following information. You'll have a channel, you'll have a program change or PC, a control change or CC, a value that goes along with that control change, and a bank. The MIDI message that you send might not need all of this information, but let's see what it all means. The first and probably most important part of the message is the channel. The channel contained in the message will tell the device receiving said message whether or not it should use that information or throw it away. Wait, how does the device know what channel it should use? You do this by setting the channel on each device. There are a possibility of 16 channels, so you can have 16 individual devices. You can set multiple devices to the same channel, but I really wouldn't recommend it unless you really know what you're doing. When sending the message, you can use one channel, or you can send it to all channels using Omni if you have that option, but I wouldn't recommend that either. Now that the device knows what message to receive, let's see how we can control it. We can do that two basic ways, with a program change or PC, or a control change or CC. When looking through your device manuals, they might not explicitly say program change or control change, so just look out for PC or CC. The main difference between a program change and a control change is that a program change will typically call a patch on a device, and a control change will change one single parameter. For instance, with my Strymon timeline, I can use a program change to recall a saved patch on my pedal, similar to just pressing the patch button, or I can use a control change to set, for instance, the mix on the pedal. Both PC and CC numbers have a range of 0 to 127. Now, it is possible to go higher using banks, but more than likely you won't have to use that, but just know that if you do need to go higher, that using a bank number will get you there. When sending a program change, you'll just need to send one number, but if you're just sending a control change, you need a value to go along with that. For instance, in my example, with the mix, if I send the CC number for the mix, it won't know what to set the mix to. So I have to use an additional value. And like the PC and CC numbers, you have a range of 0 to 127. In this instance, a value of 0 will be the mix will be at 0%, and if you have a value of 127, the mix will be at 100%, and around 64 you'll have a mix of 50%. You may run into a parameter that is digital, meaning that it's either this or that. For instance, you might have a bypass control. In that case, any values from 0 to 63 will have one setting, for instance, off, and 64 to 127 will be the other setting, for instance, on. Like I said before, it's absolutely necessary to have your manuals with you when you're doing your setups, especially with the control numbers, because you just don't know what those do. So, did I cover all your questions? I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. I was thinking about that time we had that gig on that boat and Lumi passed out. Man, that was legendary. What the fuck? Well, that is the basics of MIDI and should get you started programming your pedals. If this video helped you out, please hit that like button down there below. It really helps me out a lot. And if you want to hear more about what I'm working on, like gear reviews, tips and tricks, techniques, that kind of stuff, feel free to subscribe to my channel and hit that little bell icon so you're notified whenever I have a new video come out. But hey, until next time, rock on.